Where were you the night that Stephen Smith was killed?
The night Stephen was killed, I was at our...
I got nightmares in my head, I fear thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear the thoughts build up until I can't hear. That my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. Well, breaking news, Buster Murdaugh has broken his silence. We've very seldom heard Buster engage with the media, and he has now participated in a documentary. I think it's probably effectively apologia because his father's about to stand trial again. But he's basically trying to clear his own name in terms of the allegations surrounding Stephen Smith. Now, as some of you know, I was actually at the Moselle property earlier this year. I also visited the scene where Stephen Smith died, and I was also at the bridge where Mallory Beach lost her life. As many of you know, I also covered in depth the old Stephen Smith aspect of the case. And so we're going to deal with that aspect through Buster Murdaugh's responses in this analysis. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you appreciate this analysis, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started.
His sister said someone approached her and said that you and Stephen were romantically involved. His brother says that someone approached him and says that you were with a group of young men who beat him with a baseball bat. What do you say to that? To both of those?
Absolutely baseless rumors. I unequivocally deny anything that you just read off of that piece of paper. I did not have any personal, intimate relations with Stephen, and that obviously cannot be proven because it is baseless. I never had anything to do with his murder, and I never had anything to do with him on a physical level of any regard.
So as some of you know, the incident involving Stephen Smith is still to some extent mysterious. There are some people who believe that he was murdered, and there are some people who believe that he was killed in an accident and someone nevertheless knew what they did, and so it's not an innocent accident. It's let's say it's not a deliberate accident, but there's nevertheless foul play in the sense that the person knows what they did, but they haven't come forward. Now, before I deal with my position on the Stephen Smith incident, which I've already made quite clear, let's deal with how Buster Murdaugh deals with the question of, does he have an alibi?
Where were you the night that Stephen Smith was killed?
The night Stephen was killed, I was at our Edisto Beach house.
With your family?
With my mom and my brother.
Now, first of all, when I listened to and watched that response from Buster, there does seem to be a moment's hesitation. Something does seem to be passing through the back of his mind. There's sort of a glimmer of something going on behind his eyes, right? And I mean, obviously, his alibi doesn't really work because both people that he mentions aren't alive anymore. And so I suppose you might say, well, that then raises a flag that this is not over, or that it's not cut and dried, or that whatever, ... The question is it a red flag? Is it an orange flag? Is it a yellow flag? Or is it a white flag, right? I haven't watched the full documentary, but I would imagine that an alibi would be fairly simple to corroborate. I mean, one way is to look at his cell phone. Where was his cell phone at the time? And of course, if he was traveling to Edisto on the night that this happened, well, that's not going to be terribly helpful because, you know, the time that Stephen Smith died, you know, it's kind of it's potentially quite a long period. You know, it's quite late at night going into the next morning. And so it's not just at what, where were you on the night? It's really Where were you at certain hours spanning quite a long period of time? And I think it would be fairly simple in theory to demonstrate where Buster's phone was, right? Now, before I deal with the true crime rocket science position on Stephen Smith, and I did a very, very in-depth analysis of this before I went to America, going up to the end of March. You can check out the playlist in terms of that. Let's have a look at what Buster says about these allegations against him.
I don't want to be rude here, but have you ever been accused of murdering somebody?
No.
Well, let me tell you this, it is very, 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 it's a terrible thing to place on somebody with absolutely no fact. I mean, it has harmed my reputation. I mean, people perceive me as a murderer.
And a source of some of those allegations, certainly when I last looked, was Stephen Smith's mother, who seemed to very strongly suspect Buster Murdaugh. And she's participated in certain documentaries and given certain interviews as well. Now, for my part, I have to say, on the one hand, I don't have a huge amount of sympathy for Buster, given that he testified in defense of his father, and then his father was ultimately disbelieved by the jury and convicted of murder, despite his son's evidence, I guess, in support of his father's innocence. And I think it's also understandable that people, knowing that there are so many dirty secrets and so much corruption surrounding the Murdaughs, that this is just another instance of that. But as you know, I conducted my own independent investigation. I don't have any horse in the race. I'm not paid by anybody. I'm simply following the evidence. And based on my analysis, based on my approach, it appeared to me that Stephen Smith died in the road where he was found. Now, I'm aware that his mother doesn't think that, and I'm not sure whether his sister thinks that as well. But if you look at the original incident photos, and I have, and I posted that on a Crime Rocket 2 blog for you guys to see. It's too graphic to put on YouTube, which is why I wouldn't do it. But one can see in an instant that the how can I say this? That the where Stephen Smith is lying in the road is where he was struck and where he died. And so this whole idea that he was placed in the road and it was made to look like an accident doesn't really hold up when you actually look at those evidence photos. So in sum, I don't believe Buster is connected to Stephen Smith either in a romantic sense or in a other sense. I do think because of the Murdaugh's reputation in terms of Mallory Beach and in terms of everything else that has happened, you can kind of understand why so many people suspect Buster or somebody related to the Murdaughs in connection with an unsolved case that is literally right around the corner from Moselle. In true crime, one's got to be careful with coincidences, but I would say in this case, Buster is innocent. I know it's not the popular, I know a lot of people think that Buster is guilty, but based on my, as I say, independent investigation, that is not the case. I am interested in hearing what you think about this. Did you at one time suspect Buster? Do you still suspect him? Have you changed your mind? Just bear in mind, be careful making unambiguous statements if you can't prove them. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.